Hi, Year 11. This is Mr. Azapadi with another lesson in the Christianity unit. This one is about Jesus' teachings. So we've looked at Jesus' titles, we've looked at the key events of his life. This is about one of Jesus' main teachings, and that is the Sermon on the Mount. So we're going to look at the teachings of the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to look at what Jesus taught. We're going to look at whether they're good teachings to follow, and we're going to look at how Christians might follow them today. So this is your title. Make sure you put that in. And first thing to do is I'm just going to get you to write down some information about the sermon. So a sermon is a talk or a religious teaching. So the word is often used if you go to church and the priest gives a talk there, that's called a sermon too. So it's a religious talk or teaching. It's one of Jesus' most famous sets of teachings, and it's recorded in the book of Matthew, one of the four Gospels, the four accounts of Jesus' life in the Bible, in chapters 5 to 7. So as you can see, it's quite a big teaching, because that's 5, 6 and 7, 3 chapters it takes up. What happens is Jesus stands before a large crowd of people on a mountain and talks to them. That's basically what the Sermon on the Mount is. I've put as the last bullet point, did it really happen? Because in other books in the Bible, you find the same teachings that you find in the Sermon on the Mount, but not all together. In other books of the Bible, they're found, but they're kind of take place in different times and different places. So some people think that what Matthew did is to kind of gathered up all these teachings that he knew about Jesus and just thought, maybe just for convenience's sake, he'd have them take place all together, all in one place, to kind of gather them up. So this is, what most people know. Literalists think everything in the Bible is literally true, but most people, including many Christians now, would accept that the teachings in the Bible, as much as they may have reflected real things in Jesus' life, what seemed to have happened is that stories about Jesus were handed down to people, and then the people who wrote the Gospels kind of gathered them up together and turned them into these stories that they've written down. That in many ways they changed them in order to make the story make more sense, or something like that. That's just something about the background of the teaching. So we're going to look at what the teaching is. Now, before we look at the actual teaching itself, we're going to look at the background in terms of how, because many things in the Sermon on the Mount reacted to previous teachings in Judaism. Remember, Jesus was a Jewish person, all his followers were Jewish. So when he taught about how people should live their lives, it wasn't like he was starting with a complete clean slate, like he was just starting his own religion from the beginning. His followers already had the idea that they should be following the teachings of a religion already called the religion that we call Judaism. What Jesus did is kind of reinterpreted those teachings. So we're going to watch this video. I'll put a link underneath my video on the YouTube channel. And I want you can either do it as a mind map like I've done it there, or you can just put a subtitle, Jesus and the Law of Moses. And I want you to answer these questions as you watch the video. What is the Law of Moses? Why could the law be confusing? How did Jesus reinterpret the law? Why might Jesus' reinterpretation of the law be seen as challenging? So all I want you to do is write those questions down, watch the video, see if you can answer those questions, and then come back to this video and I'll just have a little chat about what you should have found. Okay, so pause the video now and go to the link. Okay, so you should have watched that video and made your notes. So let's just go through these things. What was the Law of Moses? Well, Moses was a prophet. That was someone who delivers a message from God, who's discussed in the Old Testament of the Bible. So he's a prophet for the Jewish people. According to the Old Testament of the Bible, Moses received a message from God giving a set of commandments for the Jewish people to follow. Altogether, most famously the 10 Commandments, but altogether there are 613 commandments in the Old Testament that form the Law of Moses. And those are the laws, the rules that Jewish people were supposed to follow. Why could it be confusing? Well, as you saw in the video, lots of people interpreted these rules in lots of different ways. Even with 613 rules, there are always questions when it comes to following a set of rules about how you put them into practice. Do we have to follow all of the rules? Do we follow them completely strictly? Are there any times you can break the rules? What about new situations? What about things that are not mentioned in the rules? How do we cope with those things? And there were lots of different groups of people interpreting the rules in lots of different ways, some more strict, some less strict, and so on and so on. So it was confusing at the time that Jesus lived. It wasn't just like there were these set of rules and everyone followed them in the same way. How did Jesus interpret them? So Jesus, like the other people of his time, had his own interpretation of these rules. And as you should have seen, one thing that's clear is that Jesus had a very strong interpretation of it, often making them more difficult, often what we might call internalizing them. So he would take a rule and say, okay, this is what has been said in the law of Moses, but I tell you. And so, for an example would be, in the law of Moses it says an eye for an eye, but I tell you not to attack people, not to fight back, so turn the other cheek. So it makes it more difficult. Or sometimes he makes it about, instead of being about what you do, it's about what you feel. So one of the laws of Moses says, do not thou shalt not kill, but he says don't even get angry. Those kind of things. Now, why are these interpretations challenging? Well, because it's very difficult to follow Jesus' interpretations. They're so strict. So not to kill is a rule that hopefully most people would agree with and want to put into practice. But not to even get angry is really difficult. So Jesus made it a very challenging set of rules. Made it what is already a difficult set of rules to follow very, very difficult indeed. Some would say impossible. Okay, let's start to look at the sermon itself. Now, the Sermon on the Mount is really, really long and it's got lots of different teachings in it. So we've got to find some way of breaking it down. And when people study the Sermon on the Mount, they often break it down into different sections which look at different things. And that's what we're going to do. So on this worksheet, which I'm going to attach to Teams, there are 4 sections we're going to look at. I'm going to go through each section. I want you to summarise on your worksheet. What did Jesus teach? Give one quote. You don't need more than one quote. And explain what the quote means. I'm going to put a few quotes down, but you just pick one for each section. How could Christians follow this today? How could it be criticised? So what did Jesus teach? Quotes and explanations. How could Christians follow this today? And how could it be criticised? Now, what you can do is I'll put all the information here on a sheet. If you just want to go through it yourself with the notes and make the notes yourself, fine. Or I'm going to go through it on this video as well. You can do it like that if you want to. So let's start with the first section, the Beatitudes, which is an interesting section of the sermon, because it's not so much about it's kind of about how you live, but it's also about what kind of person someone is. So the first section, the Beatitudes. In this section, Jesus lists different kinds of people who are what he calls blessed, or blessed, sometimes pronounced as. This means they are the kind of people God approves of. Jesus is saying in this section that people who have these qualities will be rewarded by God when they die. Some key examples of the kinds of people in this list are the poor in spirit. So this means people who realise that they need God in their lives, and that without God, their life is not complete. Those who mourn. Now, mourning usually means being sad when someone has died. However, here it means people who regret their sins and want to live a better life. Those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. This means people who want society to be more fair and just. Just meaning, this means fair. Let's look at some quotes. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. So you see it's saying these people are good, people who mourn, and they will be comforted. They will be made happy in the next life. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. So hunger and thirst for righteousness. So it's good if you want the world to be righteous. You'll be filled. In other words, your hunger will be satisfied in the next life or in the world to come. You will see that righteousness and righteousness means goodness. So in other words, you want to see there be goodness in the world. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So people who realise that they're not complete without God will have a place in the kingdom of heaven. Now, how do people follow these things in their life? Well, it's difficult. I mean, prayer is probably one of the main ones, making sure they pray so they realise how much they need God in their life, and so on and so on. Obviously, there's stuff about righteousness, about justice, trying to make the world a better place by going out there and doing things, by fighting for social justice, by giving to charities, by campaigning for a fairer world. All of those things could be things that people could do to follow this. Now, why would any of this be bad? How could it be criticised? Well, I think the stuff about hungering and for righteousness seems like a good thing. It's difficult to criticise it. What has been criticised, though, is that sometimes it seems like Jesus is recommending for people to have a negative attitude towards themselves, to kind of put themselves down. Blessed are those who mourn. So to think all the things are always about your faults and realise that you're not good enough. the poor in spirit to think, well, without God, I'm not good enough. So some people will say this is too negative about people. One of the most famous parts of this part is, blessed are the meek. The meek are people who are, quiet and put up with things and don't argue back and don't fight their corner, that kind of thing. That seems strange to some people. Sometimes people have accused Christianity of being encouraging people to let people walk all over them, not stand up for themselves. So that could be, putting yourself down too much and seeing your faults too much, and not standing up for yourself and being proud of yourself. It could be accused that Jesus is telling people to do that. Okay, the Sermon on the Mount, section 2, Jesus and the Law. This is what follows up from what the video talked about, the other video that we watched. In this section, Jesus talks about the law of Moses, the rules that Jewish people were supposed to follow. Jesus tells people that they must follow stricter rules than the law of Moses. In particular, he internalizes laws, making them about what people think, not just what they do. Here are some examples. The law says adultery is wrong, but Jesus says that even to look at someone you are not married to lustfully is wrong. The law says murder is wrong, but Jesus says that even being angry with someone is wrong. The law says if you're attacked, you can only take revenge by doing the same amount of damage that was done to you. That's an eye for an eye. But Jesus tells people they should never take revenge if they're attacked in any circumstances. So he makes it stricter, and in many cases he internalizes it. Some quotes. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. That's a bit from the Old Testament. But I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. You have heard it was said to our people long ago, you must not murder anyone. But I tell you, don't be angry with anyone. If you are angry with others, you will be judged. You have heard it was said, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Okay, make sure you got one of those down. Now, how do you practice this? How do you put this into practice? Well, by being a pacifist, that could be one thing. Practicing pacifism, refusing to go to war. The lustfully thing, I don't know if we ever talked about this, but there's this rule in America. I can't remember the rule. Some strict Christians follow this rule where they're never alone with a person of the opposite gender unless it's their spouse, the person they're married with. It became famous because Mike Pence, who's the deputy president, the vice president in America, he follows this rule in his life. So he will never spend time alone with anyone who's a woman apart from his wife. Now, the idea of that is so that to stop to practice this, to make sure he doesn't look at anyone lustfully and think have those kind of thoughts. That's an interesting thing that some Christians might do. What about this one about not getting angry? Well, prayer, meditate, Christian forms of meditation, that might be something people do in order to reduce their anger. How could you criticize it? Well, I would say that this is the one where it can be criticized for being impossible. Can you really say that it seems fine to say it's good not to murder people. Obviously that's a good rule. But is it really possible to never get angry with someone in any circumstances? That seems a difficult, an impossible thing to require of someone, to say that you must never be angry. Okay, third section, true discipleship. In this section, Jesus tells people that when they do good actions, particularly giving to the poor and praying, they should not do them to show off to others. Jesus says it's better to do these things in private. The main problem here is the reason why things are done. We should be doing these things because they're good, not because we want other people to admire us. So don't do good things just to show off. Okay, here's two things. When you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. So give quietly, don't show off about it. This is the better quote to write down because it's short. When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites who love to pray to be seen by others. So the hypocrites are people who say one thing and do another. Right, so hypocrites, here they're hypocrites because they're praying. They say they love to pray, but they only really like to do it because other people are watching. So it's saying, when you pray, do it quietly. Do it because you want to do it, not because you're showing off. What could a Christian do? Well, first of all, not, most obviously, do these things quietly. If you give to charity, don't boast about it. Don't appear on the front of the paper with that big check. Have you ever seen that? When a company or a business does charity work and gives to charity, they're often pictured giving a huge check to the charity, and it's in the local papers and everything, because they want to make their business look good for what they've done. But Jesus would say, no, give anonymously. Don't tell people that you're doing it. When you pray, don't stand up in front of people and pray in some fancy way. Just pray quietly on your own to God because you want to. Last section. In this section, this is called true righteousness. In this section, Jesus gives advice on how Christians should live, focusing on two areas in particular. Firstly, money. Jesus tells people not to be too interested in having wealth in this world, but to concentrate instead on having treasure in heaven. So in other words, getting to heaven rather than being rich now. Jesus says that people cannot have two masters, both God and money. If people make money their master, they will end up going against God, he says. So, he's very keen on the idea that you cannot put God first and put money first. Secondly, judging others. Jesus teaches we should not judge other people, or we will be judged for that. He says that everyone has done things that are wrong, so it's hypocritical to judge others. Here's your quote. Nice quote at the top. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. One below. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? So, nice, two nice quotes. The second one there, the idea is that speck of sawdust. So it looks like someone's done something, other people have done something slightly wrong and we judge them, but we've probably done something worse and we don't judge ourselves. How do we put it into practice? Well, not serving God and money. One of the things that traditionally Christians have done is refuse to work on a Sunday. So for some Christians, because Sunday is a day of rest, it's supposed to be a day dedicated to God and not to things of the world, they will not work on a Sunday. And they would say that because God wants us to rest on a Sunday and not work, and because, making the decision to go to work on a Sunday that's something you do for the sake of money, they would say that if God says you can't serve two masters, God and money, then we should put God ahead of money and not work on a Sunday. So that would be my main one. How do you put into practice not judging others? Well, Christians, it does not, when it says don't judge people, it doesn't mean that there can't be courts and law and people can't be sent to prison, but it means that we shouldn't judge people in the sense of holding their crimes against them in a terrible way. So making sure that you forgive people and you're open to reconciliation, those kind of things. Why would people say they're wrong? Well, if we go to the not working on a Sunday, some people would say, look, it's just impractical. Some people have to make a living. If you don't think about money, then you could be putting your livelihood and others at risk, and therefore you'll be a burden on other people. So you should think about money. Okay, when we filled in our worksheet, there's another worksheet which has got this question: explain how a Christian might follow Jesus' teachings in the Sermon on the Mount. So look, here's the way in which I want you to answer this question, and I want you to fill in the rest of the worksheet with two more perils. I've put one on already. One of Jesus' teachings in the Sermon on the Mount is that when people do good deeds like giving to the poor, they should not do it publicly in order to show off their generosity. Jesus said, when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And then is my explanation, because the question is not just about what he taught, but about how people would follow it. I've then explained how a Christian could follow it. A Christian could follow this today by making donations to charity anonymously. So what I want you to do is just, using your sheet, explain two more of the teachings that Jesus gave, then add a quote, and then at the end explain, and this is how a Christian could put it into practice. So, one might be, for example, Jesus taught another teaching from the Sermon on the Mount is that people should not become not fight back if they're attacked. Put the quote in and then said, a Christian might follow this by being a pacifist and refusing to fight in wars. Fairly straightforward. Okay, so yeah, make sure you fill in that 6 marker. The next thing I want to do is have a look at this question. Teachings. This is a 50 marker. The teachings of the Sermon on the Mount give us good advice about how to live our life. What I want you to do is have a look at the here. Have a look at these statements and just say and just color code them. Which of them agree that the teachings of the Sermon on the Mount give us good advice, and which disagree. So just read through them and color code them. Once you've done that, it would be good to have a go at writing an SEE plus E. Use one of these statements and see if you can write an SEE plus E to either agree or disagree with the statement. Just a couple of things to say about these things. Ones to pick out. The third one on the top, Friedrich Nietzsche. This is a famous criticism of Christianity from Nietzsche, who was a very famous philosopher. Nietzsche thought that the whole of Christianity he had a problem with, and especially its ethics, its ideas about right and wrong, because he felt like, particularly you can see it in the Beatitudes, this idea of blessed are the meek and the poor in spirit and those who mourn. He kind of felt like Christianity's encouraged people to be weak and small and to think about their faults all the time, when really we should encourage people to be powerful and proud of who they are and make the most out of life. And so, yeah, he just felt like it was a philosophy that really favoured looking negatively on life and looking negatively on yourself. So it's interesting criticism. A couple of other ones, if we look second one in at the bottom, about Christian realism. We looked at Christian realism in the Religion, Peace and Conflict unit. Christian realists are those people. Reinhold Niebuhr was a famous example, who thought that there are some teachings of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount which are not for now. They should not be put into practice now. They should be put into practice only when Jesus returns and brings about the kingdom of God on earth, a perfect time. So that would be like, so he would basically say they do give us good advice, but they don't give us good advice that we should follow now, because particularly for Reinhold Niebuhr, he would say, turn the other cheek is not something we can do right now in this world because it's too sinful and violent. What we need to do is to do whatever we can to make the world a better place now, resisting violence and with violence and using war if we need to, and then wait till the end of time when Jesus returns, when he makes a perfect world, and at that time we'll be able to turn the other cheek and live perfectly. Last one I want to bring the attention to is like the bottom right hand side, but I'm not sure how well I've phrased this, but the key thing here is that, some people criticize the Sermon on the Mount for Jesus just setting unrealistic goals, but you've got to remember that Christians it doesn't really matter that much that these things are not it's not possible for us to follow them perfectly, because it's part of the Christian teaching that we cannot get to heaven just through our own actions. We can never be perfect people in the way that God wants us to be on our own. We need to follow Jesus and be forgiven for the things we've done wrong by believing in Jesus. That's the thing about Christianity. It's not a religion that believes that we can just follow a set of rules, and if we follow the rules correctly, we get to heaven. Because they say God's standards are high, and everyone's going to fail once or twice. But that's why Jesus died for our sins, in order to forgive people so they can get to heaven. So Christians would say, yes, no one can follow them perfectly, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try or that they're bad rules. We should have a go. Okay, I think that's everything. Thanks very much. If you've got any questions, I've been through it quite quickly, but it should take you a little bit of time to get through it because these are quite detailed teachings. If you've got any questions, please let me know.